Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Uncovered. I am Eric Sexton, which is actually God in German, the billion-dollar broker. Welcome to another episode of Commercial Real Estate Uncovered. I am here with Cameron Belt, who is a senior economist with RCG Economics, and I have to look at my notepad here because I want to go over your resume a little bit. You are a fellow with the Nevada Policy. You're also a fellow at the Club for Growth, which is where I got to know you better. I'm also a fellow there. I just have to plug that a little bit. You did your master's and bachelor's at UNR. Yep. And your family, a fun fact, has been in Nevada for over 100 years.
Almost there. We're getting close. 1936. So I think when we hit 100 years, I get like a special silver token or something like that, I think.
So Cameron is Nevada through and through.
That's right.
We've been trying to plan this for a while, and I know you trying to get both our schedules together is tough. But yeah, you've been. I've known you a while, but I've seen you more involved with, doing, I guess, speaking to the economy here in Las Vegas, economics, literally what you do. Yeah. You've been, you were one of the panelists. No, you moderated at the Interface Conference, yep. And I know you've been a speaker at several of the, let's call them different kind of trade organizations here in town. Yep. So I wanted to get you on to talk about what's going on in Las Vegas, what's going on in Nevada. I'm obviously in business here, so I want to know what's going on. And every time I talk to you, I'm like, I didn't know that was going on. So I call you a policy womp, self-named, or I'll call you that.
That's fine. I'll take that moniker.
But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool that your family's been here so long, and obviously you went to UNR. I'm running Rebels, so you guys have had the Cannon long enough. I think we're going to get it back this year.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the Cannon is, UNR is the university up in Reno, and UNLV is in Las Vegas, and there's a game every year, and whoever wins gets the Cannon. And for the last long while, it's been UNR over and over again.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. It's the most expensive traveling trophy in college sports.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it's functional and it's traveling. So it'll actually go from northern Nevada to southern Nevada and back and forth. And it's an old, I think, Civil War era cannon that actually gets fired at these games.
Actually, I don't even know the origins of the cannon. Do you have any idea where it started?
I don't know where it came from, but I know that just the history of Nevada, we're battle-born, right? So we became a state, got statehood in the middle of the Civil War. Huh. And so I think a lot of this just comes down to just kind of paying homage to where we came from, where we started from. Nevada's got a bunch of fun facts all about it. Like the state constitution for Nevada had to be telegraphed, and it's the most expensive telegraph in recorded history because it had to be telegraphed during the war.
Wait, so our state constitution had to be telegraphed, I'm assuming, to Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, all the way across. So they had to do it line by line, all the way across. And it's still it's like the most expensive telegraph in history.
So there's two things. I love it. Nevada's expensive. We've got an expensive cannon. And the telegraph of the state constitution. I just literally put that together. I never put thought into that, why we're battle-born, but we were born during, the Civil War. That's so right. It's battle-born. That's see, we're already 2 minutes in and we're already learning something. So yeah, I appreciate you making the time to come here. I wanted to talk about, obviously the economy. Let's kind of start maybe 5 years back and see what we're coming up in, what you're seeing, as far as what's happening in Las Vegas. I know you don't have a crystal ball, and everybody probably asks you what's going to happen, and it's like, hey, all I can tell you is what's going on right now and what's happened. I think people get that confused with economists thinking that you're a psychic knowing what's going to happen.
I always tell people that if I had a crystal ball, I'd be living in the Summit here in Vegas.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be here right now talking to you more than likely.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important too, and that's why I like having conversations with people like you and going to as many of these like kind of panel-based things is you really get a sense of what people are seeing. And when I go to those, I like to hear what other brokers are talking about, what developers are talking about, politicians even. Mm-hmm. We just did a podcast earlier in the week with two brokers, and one of them was telling me how she did a deal during COVID where there was a municipality involved, and they had to do these like town halls and stuff. And because it was during COVID, they had to do it they couldn't do it live, so they did it via Zoom, and that was pretty interesting to hear. But let's kind of just back up to COVID, which it seems like it was yesterday, and but it was a crazy time. And can you kind of go over maybe, 2018-19 was great in the real estate world, but then 2020, everybody thought the world was going to end, and then it ended up having, a big increase here in Nevada. I mean, prices went up. I think our population went up because people were leaving from California. But maybe walk us through a little bit what you saw going from 2019 into 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main story for Nevada, since from that time frame, is basically we've grown like gangbusters. That's the way to put it. Our employment has grown by 10%, which is wild.
Since when?
Since roughly, I think, right before COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, we're seeing a massive increase in just the employment in our area, which in a small amount of time. We during that time, Nevada led the nation in terms of job growth, right? Especially in Southern Nevada too. We grew a bunch throughout this entire time frame, and that growth has obviously been. It fueled a lot of increases in home prices. It fueled a lot of increases in commercial real estate. It brought a lot of activity, brought a lot of jobs, brought a lot of people, right? The problem is those people need to be somewhere. And that's one of the biggest things that is kind of plaguing Nevada right now is land. But we can get into that in a little bit. I think in general, we've seen a lot of growth compared to other cities and compared to other states. Nevada was leading the pack. Getting to like a little bit closer right now, more recent history, we've kind of flatlined out a little bit over the last few months. But roughly 60% of the U.S. is kind of at that same point. I think in the last few months, roughly 60% of the U.S. saw less than 1% employment growth year over year for the last few months of employment numbers. It's not great, in all honesty, but we can't run hot always. That's what it comes down to. So I'm actually I'm quoted in the news press and a bunch of other things as being optimistic but not delusional about Southern Nevada specifically and Southern Nevada's economy. Like I'm generally optimistic, no matter what, because I do think that the ingeniousness of the market, people, business owners, entrepreneurs, they're smart, they're savvy, they're looking for ways to profit, they're looking for ways to take care of consumers. And they're always going to be finding ways to make things better, regardless of what's going on outside. But here locally, we do have some challenges that we have to face. But it's nothing that doesn't exist elsewhere. Everywhere comes with its mixed bag, we'll say.
Just being in commercial real estate, I go to certain conferences and stuff, and it's interesting. People all over the country really seem to be optimistic about Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Just on my own practice, I've got a lot of out of state investors that they don't live here, but they want to buy real estate here. I probably could have prepped you for this question, but have you seen any trends for, maybe some sort of statistic that has like out-of-state investment here of maybe people who don't live here?
No, that's a good question. When I was recently moderating the panel at the Interface Conference this year as well, that question actually got brought up from the audience to our panel. We had some mortgage brokers up there, along with some individual commercial agents and some banks. And basically, the high-level question was, are lenders wanting to lend to projects in Vegas?
Okay.
And overwhelmingly, we got answers of yes, they are, especially more so than 10 years ago, because the Las Vegas economy has diversified. It hasn't fully diversified, we'll say, compared to some standard that exists that nobody can really define, but it has gotten more diverse in terms of the distribution of jobs across sectors. So if we were to roll the clock back 20 years, roughly 33% of all employees in Southern Nevada were in the leisure and hospitality sector. Now it's down to 26%.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah, 33%, roughly a third of all employees, of everybody, the population that's employed in Las Vegas was in the leisure and hospitality sector about 20 years ago. Now we're at about 26%. It's still the largest employed. It's still the largest employed sector in Southern Nevada. That hasn't changed. It's just that everything else has grown along with it, right? So a lot of people talk about we need to diversify, we need to do this, and it's yes, we do to some extent. How should we do it? That's a very large question with a lot of people that try to answer it. For me, I like to say that the market should be leading in this.
Absolutely,
is what it comes down to. I mean, when you're talking about what businesses should exist. The ones that should exist are ones where individuals are willing to throw their money and their investors' money into it in order to create something, right? Yeah. That's what should exist. Yeah. And hopefully it meets the needs of consumers, right? Because those are the ones that will exist long term, unless you're getting subsidized, but that's a whole other point.
Yeah, we're not going to government stay out of business.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm the one who's saying that. Have you, when you say diversified, have you seen any specific industries that maybe have grown more than others outside of gaming here? Because, again, I can just say it for my business. I'm a commercial real estate agent. I specifically do industrial, and I've seen a little bit more specific, like specialty manufacturing, kind of geared towards around metal. Yep. I've done a couple sizable deals with companies here, which is really cool. And these aren't like the jobs that they're hiring for. These aren't minimum wage jobs. Like they need skilled people. They do a lot of in-house training, which is great for Nevada. Yeah. Not saying that you need to go to like college or something like that, and I'm not going to get into that. But the fact that they're willing to hire people that are that they feel they can groom for that job is great for Nevada. And but yeah, I'm curious if there's any specific industries, maybe if a couple that you've seen that have come here.
Yeah, so I think some of the darlings will say trade, transportation, utilities has grown quite a bit. So that's the warehousing, that's the logistics, that's a lot of that, right? We have seen some manufacturing growth. In terms of the overall number of jobs in the economy, there's not a whole lot of manufacturing. It does exist, and there are some specialized manufacturers, like you said, metal. I think there's actually a decent number of plastic manufacturers out here too.
Okay.
Talking about like drip irrigation and things like that, because the desert kind of needs a bunch of it, right? Yeah. And we've also got some really big manufacturers going forward here coming in. Haas Automotive has committed to building location in Henderson, pretty large facility.
Huge facility.
Huge facility. And I think they are meeting some, they've met some time delays in terms of that, but they are moving forward with it as well. One of the big ones actually is business and finance. It's business services. That sector has actually grown quite a bit. Relative to other sectors in Nevada over the last 20 years, which is a positive thing. That's what's kind of considered the hallmark of a developed economy, is having a more robust financial services sector, which includes real estate, obviously, brokers, includes all finance professionals. It includes, just anybody that's looking to providing these sorts of business-to-business services, right? That growth is positive, and it's what's necessary for continued growth going forward, because you have individuals looking to potentially invest not just in real estate, but also other areas throughout the economy as well. I'd say that we've seen a lot of really good growth. Again, the leisure and hospitality sector is the big gorilla in the room,
of course,
and for good reason. Like we have a comparative advantage in it. We're known internationally for being the destination for entertainment, consumption, sports, you name it. And I like for us to continue to lean into that as much as we can, because there's nobody that can do what we can do here. So when we call for diversification of the economy and looking at these things, we need to take into account what the realities of the economists call it the economic geography of the region are, right? So here's a good example, and we're talking northern and southern Nevada. So yeah, my family's been in Vegas for forever. My wife's family has been in Reno for forever. So we're kind of like this Romeo Juliet, Montague Capulet. My family's a bunch of cops. Her family's a bunch of firefighters. So we've got this north-south thing going on. But
did anybody show up to your wedding, family-wise?
Everybody did. What's funny is when we had the photo booth. We actually had a firefighter's hat and a cop hat.
That's funny.
And then we also, one of my fraternity brothers, for some reason, the day of the wedding, found a cardboard cutout of Hillary Clinton that he decided to bring to the wedding too. So there's a lot of pictures with Hillary Clinton's cardboard cutout at our wedding, we'll say.
That's funny.
There might be some video evidence of her dancing on the floor too. Anyways.
That's what weddings are supposed to be,
for. Yeah. No, but so when I talk about that, what I bring up is the fact that Vegas and Reno, we're in the same state, but we're very different in terms of kind of our linkages to other markets. So when we talk about manufacturing and warehousing and commercial, Reno has a couple locational advantages that Vegas doesn't quite yet, but will have, I think, going forward. So everybody talks about all the manufacturing, all the big stuff that got built up in Reno and Tri-Center, right? Like Tesla, like Panasonic, like everything else growing up there. There's a reason why it went up there first before Vegas. It's on the I-80. The 80 is a population vein, right? It goes from the Bay Area to New Jersey. That's big city after big city after big city. That is a very, very important distribution chain and supply chain, right? In order to be located on that, you end up unlocking a bunch of consumers. The 15, to change it up, is the main vein that we have in Las Vegas. Soon we'll have the I-11, but for now it's the 15. It goes from LA to Canada. For the past 20 years, that's not really been an economic powerhouse of a corridor. Going forward, though, one of the states that's seen the most population growth and economic growth has been Idaho, which is just to the north of us, right? It's also Montana, which is just to the north of that. And then also Alberta up in Canada, which is just further north, all on the I-15 corridor. So that allows for Vegas to actually be a part of a really important growing supply chain that's going to be more and more important going forward. And you add to this not just the employment growth and everything else, but the fact that trade's now coming from Mexico more than it's coming from overseas. That positions Las Vegas to be something really important going forward, I think. And we've starting to see a lot of talks about this too. So that's why when I say I'm optimistic, it's like, hey, long term, because my optimism isn't just next year. Again, we've been here for forever. My long-term horizon is 20 years out. I'm thinking about where are we going to be looking at, because I'm not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But I'm not looking for flashes in the pan short term. It's these long-term things and getting ahead of those trends.
But you make a good point, because I guess I didn't really think of this, but I always thought, going to logistics, like things get off the ships in Long Beach and Newport Beach, or Newport Beach. There's no ships in Newport Beach. There's yachts, but Long Beach and LA.
Yeah.
And then they work their way up the 15 freeway,
Yeah.
Going up the north to the places that you had mentioned. But one thing that you have mentioned, I mean, definitely with the Trump administration coming in, they're really trying to push, more onshoring things, but having more connection with Mexico versus China, and that helps Las Vegas a lot. I mean,
It's a huge benefit. So I think in general, there's been a lot of shifts in this logistics supply chain that have happened over the past 10, 15 years. So in the past, we've talked with our firm at RCG has talked with rail developers in particular and said like, hey, why don't you guys build out something that's a little bit more substantial here in Vegas, right? And what they've said is they go, we have to get through the El Cajon Pass. That is a lot of energy and time expended to get through that.
And actually has some weather restraints.
Right.
So every blue moon, there's it snows.
Yeah, it snows or massive fog where you can't see. Now, luckily, fog isn't as big of an issue on rail, but snow is a huge issue,
Yeah,
right?
well, 100%.
Yeah.
And I've been stuck in that. I actually had a meeting out here, and it snowed, and we had to take back roads because the Cajon was totally shut down.
Yeah, it messes everything up. And so they don't want to stop.
Yeah.
They just got through dealing with all this, expending all this energy, so they're not stopping. They're going to just roll on through. We're starting to see some shifting dynamics in terms of how the Southwest is really connected with one another, right? And it's not right now, right this second. It's slowly building up. But I do think down the road there'll be kind of an inflection point that's going to occur. And Vegas becomes positioned really, really well, along with cities like Tucson and like Phoenix. I mean, in the commercial real estate world, Tucson's growing like gangbusters right now. It's going wild. And they're seeing these trends. And it's not just going to be a flash in the pan. I think that absent any tariff discussions or anything else, I do think that the nearshoring or kind of bringing the supply chain a little bit closer to these end markets is going to be a trend that's going to continue going forward, because COVID really showed some weaknesses in some of these global chains that we've had. Not necessarily politically motivated whatsoever. It's just that, hey, if something crazy happens that's just outside of people's control, right, we need to be able to have some way of being resilient. That's my big... that's my favorite R word in economics. It's not recession, it's resilience. It's all about understanding what can we do, how can we set ourselves up for us to be able to weather whatever storm comes. It's not just how do we plan growth. You can't plan growth. But what you can do is you can set yourself up in a situation where we have all the ingredients needed for growth to take hold. That's really what it comes down to. You can't just create value out of nowhere. You have to answer the needs of the market. You have to respond to it. But getting from that, what Las Vegas is positioned for going forward is what's called an inland port. You mentioned like Long Beach and LA. Ports are usually seen as places where boat meets freight or train, right?
Yeah.
Inland ports are just, let's say that it's train meeting freight. I'm sorry, freight meeting truck, or even airplanes meeting freight or truck. It's just a port is anywhere where different modals of transportation meet together. The more and more we see these population growth in the Southwest and also kind of up north through Idaho, Montana, and Alberta, right? The more and more there's going to be a need for these kind of inland-based ports rather than ones coming in from China. It'll be taking the manufactured goods or inputs from Mexico and then getting it out to where it needs to be. So Vegas becomes positioned in an entirely different way than it was before. And that could be really, really critical going forward.
That's interesting. Well, you mentioned one thing about Reno and some of the big ones like Tesla and Panasonic. Panasonic.
Panasonic, yeah.
And I have actually worked with some companies that were trying to decide between like Phoenix, Reno, Las Vegas, and we put options together for them and send them to them, and we've lost them to Reno.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say lost them. I mean, if Nevada wins, Nevada wins.
Right.
But because of the rail spur, because their warehouses up there have a lot more rail connected to it. And I think that's something that a lot of people who maybe aren't in the industrial world think of. Yeah, it's great to have truck courts, but if you have train access, train cart access, Nevada, like Las Vegas, we're starting to get more of it. There's some buildings here, but every time I see a building vacant that has rail spur, it gets rented pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very interested to see that. I actually sold a 109-acre site up in Apex a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And part of the attraction is it has a rail spur attached to it. It has the rights to build off of one. So I'm kind of interested to see what they do with that. while we're on the topic of you mentioned entertainment. Obviously, we're the entertainment capital of the world. I know there's a lot of other cities that are competing with us, but one thing that has changed over the last 5 years, we had the Golden Knights come to Las Vegas. The Raiders were a big one. I know that was a huge topic until they opened up, and those poor guys even had their inaugural year during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just that was unfortunate. I mean, I was so amped for that. And then, we have the A's coming.
Yep.
You and I are both Dodgers fans. Which
We are.
We're in the playoffs right now. I think they're going to, have two in a row here. But what about the sports? We're going to talk about the sports, but I was at NASCAR last weekend, and afterwards I was just interested to see on the economic impact. And I was reading some articles that last year they estimated that NASCAR itself coming to Las Vegas literally twice for a couple days, was about $270 million of direct impact in 1 year. That's a huge number. But having the Raiders come and the A's coming and the Golden Knights, which is kind of Las Vegas's, what is it? It's kind of our crown jewel because they were born here.
Yeah.
They won the Stanley Cup. Their first year they made it to Stanley Cup, and their games are super fun.
Yeah.
But can you elaborate maybe on some things that the sports teams have brought here to kind of, as our key word is diversify, but diversify entertainment?
I'll say this: I'm a huge fan of sports. I've played sports every single year of my life since the point where I could be organized. Actually, my grandfather got me into karate when I was 4 years old. I was the youngest person in our dojo to get a black belt, actually, because he started me. He literally went in and said, "How young will you accept somebody?" And they said 4 years old. On my 4th birthday, I was in the dojo. I was learning. So sports has been ingrained in me for forever. And also my grandmother was actually second in charge to Manny Cortez at the Convention Authority when I was growing up. And so I was very lucky that I had access to the professional sports scene in Vegas before it became even as big as it is now. So I think one thing that I like to tell people about sports is it's been a part of Vegas's culture for a very, very, very long time. It's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger business now. We're hitting with the Golden Knights coming in, it's changed the landscape. But I always like to call out, at least to the roots of us, we started off as a boxing capital of the U.S. because boxing was illegal most other places. When you go early 1900s, we were this haven for organized sports, right? And so it's been a part of us. We've always had big boxing matches. We've had NASCAR for what is it? At least over 25 years at this point. I'm not sure what the exact time frame is, but around there. I think it's at least 20. And we've also had Cashman Field, where we used to have Big League Weekend, where the home run derby was there. I remember seeing Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and all these guys up there hitting bombs at Cashman. So it's been part of our ethos for a long time, but it hasn't really been the biggest thing because the professional organizations they were a little bit afraid to have teams based here for, gambling issues or whatever else, right? Well, I think all those issues have been put to rest. And so it's becoming really huge, massive business, like you're saying. The Golden Knights especially alone has caused not only just a lot of pride in the city, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's so much pride.
Everybody owns a Golden Knights jersey or shirt. I mean, when we make it to the playoffs, our whole office, people just show up wearing. Yeah. It's fun. And it's like a really simple thing to be connect with people about.
And it's one of the best sporting events that I've ever gone to. When you go to T-Mobile, you feel the energy, right?
It's unreal.
It's unlike anything else. I've seen huge news writers for ESPN say that is the greatest stadium experience I've ever had, regardless of the sport, just because of how easy it is to get in, get out, and whatever else. So I'm really excited to see that, right? And then the growth, obviously, of other pro sports like the Aces, right?
They just won their 3rd championship in 4 years.
It's wild.
And speaking on, sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're good.
But we have vendors that'll bring us in baked goods or something, obviously is hey, don't forget about us when you need this service. But they brought us Aces branded donuts.
Yeah.
So that's how big the sports goes. Where vendors are coming into our office. Hey, here are Aces donuts. I'm all right, well, here we go. But yeah, it's crazy. They won 3 out of the last 4 years.
It's absolutely wild. And so with that comes obviously a lot of business, and obviously it's a lot of options for tourists to spend money. Right, is what it really comes down to for the entertainment side. It obviously gives opportunities for locals to spend, but it also, what we are looking for when it comes to growing the economy here, growing the economy kind of anywhere, you want to look to kind of importing cash from elsewhere, we'll say. Because just shifting the spending habits of locals, you're not really necessarily growing things, you're shifting. So when I go to a Golden Knights game, I'm no longer going someplace else. So there's a benefit behind there, but it may be that I'm reducing my spending someplace else because I'm now buying a ticket, right? But it could be that I'm just not going on a trip to LA, and so now I'm spending more here. So it's fun when we talk about the impacts of any of these really big things, because as an economist, I always have to put on this hat of basically this net new. It's this idea of, yes, there's a lot of activity that happens here, but is that activity net new entirely to the region, or is it just what's associated with that thing, right? Is it a shift from other things to that?
That's a really good example. Like I went to a Dodger playoff game last week.
Yeah.
A buddy and I went out there. Our ticket was, we had to buy it second, off of Ticketmaster because it was a playoff game. The ticket was like $400.
Yeah.
We stayed the night in LA. We got a hotel room. We went to dinner. We went out a little bit afterwards. We had breakfast the next morning. So that whole trip, I probably spent close to $1,000 on a one Dodger game.
Yep.
And if the A's were here, I'd want to watch the Dodgers and A's play.
Yeah.
And so that's a prime example that just happened last week. Of
Yeah.
Like that $1,000 could have stayed in Las Vegas.
It's possible. It can, absolutely. But it's also this idea of also understanding where our tourists are spending their money versus where they were before also. So as we're changing the landscape of what exists in Vegas for offerings for entertainment and everything else, we always have to kind of look at it through a lens of how are spending patterns shifting, right? The Convention Authority has a lot of data on this. They track this quite a bit. And you'll see, and I'm never like, some people will say like I'm trying to sit back and kind of throw shade at anything. It's like, no, I just like to have accurate estimates of what things are, right? Because a lot of times, one of the things that gets me with a lot of these sports franchises or anything else, whenever we throw public money behind them, that's where I start to go, this is really good for the region, but throwing public funds behind it might not be the best use of public funds because it's starting to look at unknown benefits really to start, right? And unknown returns. I think as of right now, we've got over $1 billion for Allegiant Stadium that the public is on the hook for, as long as hotel taxes don't cover it over. So we should be okay. But if a certain time, if actually a trend that we're seeing right now with a decrease in visitors happens for a prolonged period of time, that type of investment is going to end up on the taxpayers' wallets, and that's not great. So while I am amped for sports and I am amped for everything that it brings along with it, I want it to be done in a way that is sustainable going forward, right? And sustainable for all of our pocketbooks in general. And there's no question that it brings activity, but it also does shift it. So one example that I'll tell you is Super Bowl weekend. Super Bowl weekend here was huge, right? But in my past life, I worked for Uber and Lyft on the corporate side, right? So I was kind of like I was in charge of analytics, strategy, and operations for the Southwest for Lyft for about 5 years. I kind of had to wear a bunch of different hats and look at a bunch of different things. But I tell people I had the most robust data set for our tourists that lived in my brain because of what data we had for all of our riders. Not only did I know how many riders we had in our area, but I knew where they were from, and I knew kind of what they did, where they were from. Or if I didn't know it, I could look it up, right? I could see that we've got a group of people that happen to come from Indianapolis all the time, and at home they go out this month. I had a pretty interesting way of being able to trace things back. I didn't know who they were.
Never thought of that.
I didn't know who they were. I couldn't figure out that this is Eric Sexton, he does this, but I just knew that this rider number 45653, whatever it is, right? That they have these patterns. And we can kind of understand and learn from what they're doing and also kind of see how they're growing the city. And I also figured out, when our spikes happened versus other times. And so I knew that Super Bowl was going to be big. But I also know that relative to other things that happen in Vegas, it's a 60,000 person event. And we've got like CES that's 200,000 people. Vegas is built for excess, which is awesome. We're built for doing these things all the time. Compared to other cities, we are so much better situated for having big events.
Oh yeah, going to conferences in some other cities is a nightmare.
No. Yeah, and that's one of the big things is on the conference side, we can talk about that a little bit too, because my wife happens to deal in that world. But conferences, any sort of large events, we're built to be able to make it as frictionless and as easy as possible, right, for anybody coming in. You hold a Super Bowl in, I think a few years ago, that was in Indianapolis. People had to stay 2 hours away because there were no hotel rooms in the immediate area. That issue doesn't exist here, right? Even if it's held in San Jose, it shuts down San Francisco because there's not enough in the immediate San Jose area. They have to kind of come in from San Fran.
Which makes it a nightmare with Ubers and
right,
because the BART for some reason I don't think they built to San Jose.
For some reason, it's probably political pressures, but in any case, it's probably cartels, but not Mexican cartels, taxi cartels. Just as bad. No, I'm joking.
Different cartels,
different ones, politically backed ones. So in any case, the thing to think about here is that we're built to handle these big things. I think that going forward, Vegas should obviously be on a rotation for like the Super Bowl. It should be, I think, between 4 different markets more than likely because they can handle it. So it'd be Vegas, LA, New Orleans, and probably like Tampa.
Yeah, New Orleans can handle crowds.
Or Atlanta. You kind of add those ones, if you're south of the equator, because it's going to be, or not south of the equator, if you're in the southern half of the U.S., because it's going to be cold, because it's always February.
That's a good point.
So you have it being in these areas, you can make it a little bit better fan experience. So I think that those things going forward, that's really helpful. But what was crazy about the Super Bowl is I noticed, I was really excited to see kind of what the gaming numbers were and really excited to see what everything was. And it was interesting because we obviously saw a spike in tourism, right? That week we had an influx of people, which was great. We saw a big increase in room rates. So there was a lot of people who wanted to be here, but they were willing and able to pay for really high room rates.
Well, the Super Bowl tickets are
extremely expensive.
Yeah, astronomical.
But here's the difference: gaming win. So the amount of money that was won at the casinos, it wasn't that big. If you compare it in real dollars, so you adjust it for inflation to previous years, we're actually down from a few years before in terms of the amount of dollars that were won at the casinos during the Super Bowl when it was hosted here in Vegas. I'm the first person who kind of actually went through and adjusted these numbers for inflation because everybody likes to talk about them in current dollars. And I don't know if you've been around for the last few years, but we've gone through a period of pretty crazy rampant inflation. So $100,000 today doesn't mean what it did in 2022, right? I think I did the math the other day. $125,000 in 2022 is $144 now.
Oh, that's
not
depressing.
It is. It's the reality. But like when we're looking at these and comparing, we have to kind of look at it that way. And what happened was when the Super Bowl was here, we changed who was here. It wasn't the gamblers because Vegas happens to be a city where people will come to watch an event that happens someplace else.
Yeah.
NCAA, March is one of the biggest months in tourism for all of Vegas, right? Not only is it spring break, but it's also coincides with NCAA. People will come here to be here and watch elsewhere, which is a huge benefit, right? And so we have to kind of make sure that we're also leaning into that side of things too.
No, I actually flew into Las Vegas 2 years ago, a couple days before the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And there was a group of guys that are probably in their 50s. There's like 10 of them. They had matching shirts on saying Super Bowl Vegas trip or something like that. And there were a group of friends that came to Las Vegas. And I went and talked to one of them because we were waiting for our luggage. I was just curious. And they're like, yeah, we didn't want to go to the game. Well, he's like, we wanted to go to the game, but we weren't going to pay for the tickets.
Yeah.
So they were coming here to watch it because the sports books and stuff have really cool venues here to watch. I think Circa has that big one. I can't think of the name. Stadium Swim or something.
So Stadium Swim, and then they've got the Circa sports book is what it is, yeah.
These sports books are crazy. They have these huge recliners. You can bet. You can order food. You do drinks, whatever you want. So it's like... Yeah, I didn't think of that. That might, when the event is here, it might deter some people. So it depends on
it changes
the revenue changes.
Well, yeah, because what happens is those guys who want to be here just to watch the game, or just the regular fans that can't afford the $4,000 tickets, right, to the event, they can't go to the event. But if they want to be here, the only trouble is that you end up increasing the room rates, right? So you end up getting the people who want to be here the most, or the people who have to be here. All the support staff for the Super Bowl, all the broadcasting, everything else, right? All those guys, they come with purchasing cards. When you come with a corporate card to Vegas, which is why conventions are really important, when you bring a corporate card here, you're going to spend a lot more money than you would if you're just a family of 5, right? You can spend more, but like you're going to be a little bit more spendthrift with your company's cash rather than your own family's cash. Of course. And there's nothing wrong. I think what we need to do is we need to provide products that go across the entire spectrum of visitors. We can't build only for one segment of the market. And I think that that's one thing that we need to be focused on is making sure that we have product offerings for the family of 5 and the corporate guys.
Have you seen a shift away from kids? I know for a while Vegas tried to do this family-friendly thing, which I was just like, what are you doing? Like, it's not like I actually lived on the Strip for a while, like in one of the high rises, and you'd go walk through a casino, even if it was like 10 or 11 at night, and you see people with strollers, little kids. I'm like, what are you doing? There's just women walking around half naked. Like, I don't have kids, but if I did, I wouldn't. That's one of the last places I'd take them. But I know I'm criticizing people's parenting. But they have you seen like any specific like I guess we used to have like Sin City, and then what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and just kind of these different campaigns, how they've affected who comes here, like that corporate versus personal.
There's changing patterns all the time. I think with the rise of sports, we are seeing some more families, not necessarily like young families, necessarily, bringing babies or anything else. But I think right now, if you look at the visitor counts, we are a little bit down on convention year over year compared to just overall visitors. So I think we're down more year over year in terms of convention goers than we are in just regular visitors.
Is that due to other cities maybe pulling from that, or just conventions not happening as much?
No, I think part of it is because of our response to COVID at first, because we were one of those states, unfortunately, that shut down a lot. Yeah. And I know a few conferences that chose to go elsewhere and have now gone on to like a rotating basis rather than being here all the time. But I think that what I've seen is there is a return to being here a lot more because when you go to someplace else and go to a conference, like you said earlier, it's not great. It's not as good of an experience as it is in Vegas. It's seamless here, in all honesty. It's a lot easier because we're built for this. If you go to Chicago, if you go to, not to call it any specific cities or anything else, but Chicago is the one that just always comes up. I know for a fact that people come back and they're like, it's way easier to deal with everything here. Even if it's difficult to deal with some of the Teamsters or some of the property specifics, it's much more difficult everywhere else. And so I think that COVID unfortunately gave people a chance to be like, oh, maybe we should try something different. But I think long term it's coming back. Also, it could just be that just convention, in general, with the trends, the macro economy right now. It's still big business. I mean, one good example is IMEX was just here a few weeks ago. IMEX is basically the International Meeting Expo for meeting planners, incentive travel, all this fun stuff. This is a fun plug for IMEX because they're wonderful partners of my wife, Amber, who actually works for a destination management company here, which is really big business. It's basically she's in charge of anything from wheels down to wheels up when a company comes into town. So it's like Google, IBM, or IMEX with thousands of people from all over the world coming here. She helps them with transportation from the airport to the places to also everything else in between. Sometimes it's events that happen or anything else. And it's really big business, right? It's huge. IMEX was just here 2 weeks ago. It was their largest one ever. And we're talking, a couple, tens of thousands of people. It's not small by any means come big business.
No, it's important to remember, too, that when people come for those conferences, a lot of times they'll bring their family and tack on a vacation to it.
Exactly.
Maybe come early, leave late kind of thing.
We actually went out to Germany earlier this year for that exact reason. My wife and I, we went to IMEX in Frankfurt. They hold one in Frankfurt, and they hold one here in Vegas every single year. So one for European-based travel, and then one for more U.S.-based, right? And we ended up tacking on an extra 5 days to be in Germany while we were there. So we're an exact example of this, right? This type of behavior that we know can't exist. But I will say this, though. We're getting to the point where we're starting to see, while there's still a lot of interest in here from these corporate entities, they're getting much more budget constrained. They're asking for, the way to put it is they've got champagne tastes on a beer budget. It used to be that it was champagne taste on a champagne budget, right? But right now, given trends in the U.S. economy, given decreased savings rates, given a lot of flat job growth, things like that, we're starting to see companies come here. They want to be here. They absolutely want to be here without question. But while they're here, they're a much more budget conscious than they have been before, and that's just a real trend that we have to kind of understand.
One of my clients said this, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this. It's a great pivot.
Yeah.
We were renewing a lease, and last time he did a 10-year lease, and he's like, hey, I only want to do like 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, what? Like, you've been in business. He goes, Eric, think about the last 5 years. Would you want to commit to something to the next 5 years? So in commercial real estate, leases are kind of like 3 to 10 years. It depends on the deal. It just gives consistency. It helps the tenant budget what they're going to have moving forward. And it also, landlords like it, obviously, because they know what they're going to make. But I've seen a little bit of a trend where some tenants want to do shorter leases because they're like, hey, would you want to commit to something this long based on the last 5 years for the next 5 years?
Right.
And the reason I want to ask that is you mentioned something on company budgets. Do you have any specific data or anything? I mean, whether it's Las Vegas or nationally, you mentioned I think you said savings.
Yeah.
Savings is down, but maybe like I always plug Dave Ramsey. He doesn't know who I am, but I'm a big fan of his stuff. But like talking about maybe household, savings or credit card debt, or like where our average household in Nevada or Las Vegas or even nationwide stand right now. Do you have any insight to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever I do the presentations, I go to these groups, I kind of start at the U.S. level and then I funnel down to Vegas specific, because it kind of helps people. It helps organize our brains, I think, when we start talking about the high level stuff that we can't really control whatsoever.
Okay.
But that what we can't control shapes what we should be doing locally, right? And what we should be focusing, not only just our own households budget and efforts on, but also our community and so on and so forth, right? So it's being aware of the macro kind of allows for the micro to come through. That's the economist in me coming out rather than just the normal guy talking. But at the macro level, at the U.S. level, I can sum the U.S. economy up in 3 ways, basically. Debt is up, savings are down, and wages aren't up enough. That doesn't necessarily spell the greatest forward-looking projections for growth, right? Because savings fuels growth in general. It's not just savings; it's also savings floods over into the investment side of things, because the more households save individually, the more funds are available for banks to loan out, right? The more that they're able to say, okay, this guy's going to hold on to some cash either in a CD or whatever else, however you want to set yourself up. But generally speaking, the more that we end up saving as an entire culture, as a society, as an economy, the better our future growth prospects are. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is we reduce our amount of consumption right now in order to fuel and invest new things that are going to be going forward and growing. So the last few years, I've been giving these talks for the last 2 years or so after I left Lyft and ended up being with RCG. And I kind of was the canary in the coal mine in a lot of ways, where I told everybody, hey, we're breaking records here locally in terms of gaming win, right? But if you adjusted it for inflation, we're nowhere near where we were in 2006. But we were still up and we're still good. But we weren't necessarily breaking records on paper. We were just looking. And I told everybody, I go, look, we're going to see a downturn come. It's just going to happen because the savings rate.
How long ago was this?
We're talking a year and a half
Okay.
at least. Just at the Legislative Council Bureau this past October, John Restrepo and I got brought in to kind of give our assessment of things, and we kind of called it out and said, hey, one of the things that you're going to see is likely flat to negative growth on taxable retail sales going forward at the state level, and also gaming win. And both those things happened. And that's why in the middle of the legislative session, not to get down that rabbit hole, but they had to kind of rebase their budgets and kind of look at things because the tax revenues didn't hit the projections, right? But that's all a function of what's happening nationally. Nationally, we're starting to see a lot of stress coming from COVID. What happened is billions upon trillions of dollars were printed out of nowhere to fuel all the COVID checks and to fuel basically the federal government spending, right? The Federal Reserve ended up becoming a de facto funder of the federal government over the past few years. They opened up the money printer, and rather than giving it out to directly to private entities and banks and things like that like they did during the Great Recession, they instead kind of just turned it straight to the federal government and said, here you go, here's all this money, do with it what you will. They did that by buying a bunch of long-term treasury securities, right? This is not great in general. I mean, if we're going to talk about the macro economy, the largest elephant in the room in the world right now is our debt to GDP ratio and just where our federal debt is. It's massively unsustainable. But all this cascades down. It takes time. It has lags. We're talking 6 to 12 months, if not even longer, for all of these things to kind of come together, which is why a lot of times people will sit back and say like, oh, economists are always wrong. It's like, no, generally speaking, obviously economists can be wrong. Half of us have different projections from one another. So just by the law of numbers, half of us are going to be wrong in some way. But usually what ends up happening is there's certain things that all of us agree on, and it just doesn't happen immediately. And so everybody's like, oh, and they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, no, it's just that time exists and things take time to flow through. And so with all the decreased savings, that decreases our forward growth. And we're starting to see that come through. This year alone, the first quarter of for GDP was negative, right? We've come back pretty strong the last two. But year over year, we're looking at pretty flat growth, We used to see, 3% plus, and now we're kind of happy with 2% year over year, which is not ideal. And it's coming from a lot of debt.
Where's the sweet spot with growth? You say 2% is bad, but I mean, I know that's an opinion question.
Yeah, there's really no sweets. I think that, long-term growth-wise, again, prior to the Great Recession, we were seeing greater than 3% year over year. That's great to be at, in all honesty. There's no way to plan it, but there's ways to make it. There's ways to make growth easier versus harder.
Where does Nevada? You said kind of on a whole, kind of repeating, debt is up, savings is down. Where does Nevada or Las Vegas compare to the whole country? Because I mean, we're a big country.
Yeah.
I've lived in California, I've lived in Montana, and our state's very different. And earnings are different, cost of living is a bit different. So I know it's unfair when somebody might compare rural Oklahoma to like Beverly Hills. You're like, hey, this is a whole different universe. But like, how does Las Vegas and Nevada compare to the rest of the country with that?
There's two answers to that one. There's historically how we compare, and right now how we compare. Historically, we've generally been a much more lower cost of living place with easier access to housing, pretty low rates for commercial land. It's been very easy and open. The last few years, it's been a little bit of a different story. So right now, if you look at, there's Wells Fargo and the Home Builders Association nationally have this really cool data point called the Cost of Housing Index. And what they do is they say, what percentage of a median income household in this area would they have to spend to afford a mortgage on a median price house in the area? Okay, so in Vegas, we're roughly at, I think it's, I can't remember the numbers right. It's like 44%, I think. U.S. nationally, it's 38%. So we're a little bit higher. We need a little bit more here than elsewhere right now. In the past, we've been a little bit more affordable. Now, this has to do with just the fact that we've grown so much. Like I said before, 10% employment growth over a small amount of time is crazy. So unfortunately, wages just haven't kept up as much, is what it comes down to. We've seen some growth, but on a real basis, over the last 10 years or so, I think we've seen wages go up by about 5%, adjusted for inflation. At the national level, it's about 6%. So we're just a little bit behind, not by much, but just a little bit behind. But it all comes with different pressures, right? When you're bringing people in and you're experiencing net positive migration, there's some growing pains that come along with it. I do think that cost of living in general, though, when you look at larger metros, we're still killer. Yeah. When you look at so there's a different measure of housing costs, and it's called the Case-Shiller Index. And the Case-Shiller Index says, let's take the top 20 metros, right, in the U.S., and let's look at their cost of housing. When you look at Vegas compared to that, we're significantly cheaper than the top 20 metros. That's really awesome for people who want to move here. People who want to move from LA, people who want to move from San Francisco, people who want to come from elsewhere to be here. Our housing is dramatically cheaper than where they are right now. But that other metric that I brought up, the cost of housing index, which looks at those who live here right now, there's a lot of pressure for those individuals because wages haven't kept up as much. And that's just a result of a lot of different factors. But the biggest limiting factor, in all honesty, is what I call this fake border that exists around our city, called the Southern Nevada Land Preservation Management Act. It's what they call the disposal boundary. Yeah. So if people don't know, the disposal boundary was written into law, I think, in the 90s. I'll say this: it's one of the shortest federal bills I've ever read. It's 2 pages long. It's pretty impressive, the fact that it's just 2 pages and it sets it in federal law. But basically, what happened is, people might not know, but the federal government owns the vast majority of all of Nevada's land.
Yep.
Right? Clark County alone, I think it's like 93% of all land is managed by the federal government throughout the entirety of Clark County. So within the disposal boundary, it represents roughly like 7% of the entirety of the county. And we've been forced to constrain all of our growth to only 7% of the land in this area. That leads to some serious pressures in terms of development, right? It reduces the options for developers to be able to go out and develop certain projects, and it also starts to constrain growth to the point where you have to build warehouses next to houses, industrial next to this, and it leads to some really weird dynamics. And so we've been able to grow with this over the last 30 years really well, but we're hitting a point where we're going to run out of developable land in Las Vegas by about 2030, especially for large-scale employment centers.
So by the land we have accessible to us right now in Clark County that's not controlled by the federal government.
Yeah.
We're potentially going to run out by 2030
as long as
trends continue.
Current trends continuing will be done with large parcels by that time.
We were actually talking about this the other day. There's an expression called it's an act of Congress to get this done, meaning it's nearly impossible to get done. And correct me if I'm wrong, but to get that land is literally an act of Congress.
It's an act of Congress. That's exactly correct. It's not just a nomenclature that you use here. It's literally what it comes down to.
And we're not going to get too much into this because you and I are both way into politics, and I try to keep that out of this. But they can't agree to anything anyways. I mean, our government's shut down right now because Congress can't come up with something. But when they talk about selling it, other states don't have this issue where the federal government controls their land. So when you go talk to Congress people from other states, they don't understand it or they don't care about it. And then they also argue about where the money would go. So if the federal government sold X amount of acres to developers, where does it go? Does Nevada get the land because it's our land, or does it go into the general fund or whatever? And it's like it's
a whole mess.
Infuriates me.
Yeah, it's a whole mess, and it's
but
but it's important for the context of Las Vegas. So the West has this issue much more than the rest of the U.S. Right. So when we look at the Western United States, there's a lot more federal owned land throughout the entirety of the West. But what's funny about that is you can overlay two maps on one another. And in some of these presentations, I've done that, where you look at the U.S. and the percentage of federal land, and then you also look at a topographical map of the U.S. And the West is, I don't know, it's very mountainous. Yeah. There's a lot of land that actually, it's not the same as like in the middle of the Midwest, where like having access to all this land means you can develop whatever you want to because it's easily developable. Even at Apex here in southern Nevada, a lot of those parcels, they can be 800 acres, but only 20% of it's developable because more than half of it, 80% of it's on a mountainside, right?
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the land that's available, or even just within Clark County, you have to ask the question of, if we were to get more land, how much of that land that we're going to get can we actually build on too? Because Congress has acted as Catherine Cortez Masto, Susie Lee, everybody's tried to put a bill through. Amadeus tried to get a bill through. A bunch of states, like you said, don't understand our issue, but they also there's some states that understand our issue, but they're jealous of us because that 2-page bill for getting land from the BLM that's in the disposal boundary in Las Vegas, it's actually kind of a straightforward process compared to all the other states' processes. It's not the same exact sale auction that exists in Las Vegas as it is elsewhere. So even trying to get those who know about our situation aligned with us is difficult because they're like, you guys have it treated better anyways. And so aligning all these different parties. Yeah. But the problem is we need, in my mind, the best policy solution going forward isn't to sit back and argue over how much more land could we extend the disposal boundary out this much more or anything else. It's let's destroy it. Let's destroy the disposal boundary as a concept and just allow entrepreneurs, developers, whoever to come through and say, I have the cash, I have the vision, I want to build here, I'm going to do this. Because if you happen to be just on one side of the disposal boundary, you can't touch it.
Yeah.
And it really constrains how we're able to grow as a city.
How about that? Letting the free market figure it out.
Yeah,
I mean that as a concept.
Here's what I'll say. The market's much smarter than I am. It's much smarter than you. It's much smarter than everybody in a room, whether it's the legislature or just a group of local CEOs getting together. The market's extremely, extremely smart. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
It can mess up. There's no question about that. But it's the one thing that's brought us the most prosperity, not just in our region, but throughout all of human history. Which is funny. That's what actually the Nobel Prize was just awarded this week for economics to 3 people who explained that exact story about the requisites, what's needed in order for massive amount of growth going forward. And just in general, explaining the economic history of that hockey stick moment of going from poverty across the world for forever to all of a sudden wealth. And it's really important things that we should take note of, local planners especially.
That kind of makes me happy to hear because Congressman Amedee is up in rural Nevada and part of Reno, or all of it. Yeah. And the Congress people we have down here, Cortez Masto and Susie Lee, are Democrats and Republicans. But it's kind of nice to hear that both of them tried to do something.
Oh yeah.
For land.
Yeah.
Which is that gives me a little bit of glimmer of hope that that even though they're opposite sides of the aisle or different parties that they're still trying to work together, it's nice to see that. I actually put a video up on Instagram yesterday saying that I was going to have you on, and I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask you. One of them was from, let me find it here. So I have a friend, this is another good example. I like to mention this. I'm a fairly conservative guy. I have a friend who is he's a doctor and he lives in California.
Okay.
Really smart guy, but it's a good example too. We disagree on politics.
Sure.
But we can have conversations about them and stuff, which is, I think is a lost thing in this. Very intelligent guy. I don't understand why he believes what he does, but he's a good friend, and I appreciate his him actually taking the time to send me this. He said, what are your thoughts on the aging U.S. population demographic, slowdown in the immigration, and the lower birth rates in future real estate demand? And you could answer that in whether it's U.S. or Las Vegas. You want me to repeat that? Or
No. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a very big topic in general. So what I'm going to say is population growth fuels economic growth. Because with more people, you have more opportunity to do more things for larger groups of individuals. It's a capacity question, right? There's two different types of capital. You got capital, which is dollars and cents, right? Mm-hmm. That you can deploy to do things, and you have human capital. And human capital is what each individual can do to benefit others. That's what the market is all based around, is building value for other people. Right? It's I provide a service that somebody else values, and then therefore I get to go do things and have services that I value. Like that's what the economy is in general. It's just a bunch of us figuring out ways that we can make other people's lives better. And the more people we have here, that means the more benefit that we can create throughout the entire economy. And because of technology increases and globalized supply chains, the more people in the U.S., the more we can export and do more things to other countries, right? That's just bottom line, just basic economics. The more people you've got, the more things you can do. Population growth is necessary for long-term economic growth. Declining birth rates, there's a lot of stuff that's out there. I think that, there's a lot of factors that factor into it. There's health trends, I think, that can be part of the culprit. I think a big part of it is, this generation of millennials especially, coming out with a massive amount of debt from college. There's been a lot of families that haven't been able to be formed that maybe potentially would have been formed had they not been underneath a big debt burden. I think that's that got perpetuated, and I'm hoping that it'll change going forward at some point because we need that growth. With that, immigration is also a net positive thing. So I mentioned earlier the Nobel Prize went out to 3 individuals. All 3 of them are immigrants to the U.S., right? Immigrants tend to make new businesses at a higher rate than native-born Americans. They represent roughly a quarter to a third of all U.S. patent activity. Right? It's not just about importing people; it's about importing brains too, is what it really comes down to. Now, that being said, not all immigration is the same. You don't want to be bringing people in that have history of crime or anything else necessarily, because that's a really bad net negative.
That's a drain on the system,
exactly.
Not a contribution to
right.
the system.
But in terms of opening up the doors to having the best minds here, it's one of the most important things possible. And so, like when you're talking about you and your friend talking but disagreeing, it's funny because Joel Mokyr, one of the people who won the Nobel this week, he talks about in his discussions this what's called the Republic of Letters that came through the Enlightenment period in Europe. And what it was the first time that we started to see ideas shared across borders, because all these Enlightenment era thinkers began to share ideas with each other. And maybe they were political outcasts in Spain, and they were talking to somebody in Italy, right? And it was really important to have that conversation because they were depressed in their own city, in their own local place, but they could talk with and expand on ideas from people across borders. That's part of the long narrative of history of just growth, is having the ability to share ideas freely. I think Matt Ridley's got this really cool quote. I'm quoting it from an economist named Pete Becky, who tweeted it out earlier this week, and it's, "Innovation is the child of freedom and the parent of prosperity." We need innovation to grow us forward, and there's no cap on it. But like I said, for me, it's just this idea of more population growth is better. Obviously, the more we can do for our native individuals who are here, the better. But if they're also burdened by debt and they're kind of under the ground. It's difficult to go out there and do that, and you end up becoming part of this system that just kind of keeps you subsisting rather than prospering. It's really tough.
I actually have a debt question for you. I don't know if you have an answer to this or not. I use the Back to the Future analogy. When you're was it Marty McFly goes back in time, and you see them sitting on the ground watching TV, and he makes that he brings up. He goes, "Oh, I've seen this before," and they're kind of baffled because it's live. And he says, "Oh yeah, I watched it in my room," or something like that. Yeah. They're like, "What? You have a TV in your room? What? You must be rich." So I don't know. Decades ago, families had one car, maybe one TV, one phone. There were no cell phones, personal computers. But I've seen this trend where people have more stuff now. Couples have 2 cars. They have that, and a lot of this stuff is like financed. Have you seen like the household debt? Has there ever been any kind of, I don't know how to ask this question, but is there any kind of like data point on like the times different where people have more stuff and they finance more stuff, and where like those decisions and how they finance that stuff negatively impacts the economy? I mean, clearly they're buying stuff, which is good for the economy, but I just feel like people, I don't know quite how to phrase that, but like I was at dinner with a friend and he brought that up where he's like, did you ever see that movie? And I'm like, I never thought of that. Where people homes just had less items, less cars, less one TV, one phone, like that kind of stuff.
I think that there's, the first thing I'll say is to each their own is one of the most important economic concepts out there, because value is always subjective. So some people like being cluttered, right? And they might just like having all that stuff, and other people like having this minimalist life. But your question that gets brought up is, what are you fueling that with, right? Even if you're minimalist, you could be minimalist with a Lamborghini.
Sure.
Right? But that Lamborghini could be completely financed and you're paying $8,000 a month for it.
40% of your income.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
So this debt burden. So I'll say that when I brought up, savings are down, debt is up. We're back up to a point in terms of percentage of household debt payments. The percentage of the household's income that's going towards debt payments is roughly 11% or so, if not a little bit higher, at the U.S. level. That's different, and I'm trying to remember exactly what that's related to. If it excludes certain things, it could exclude mortgages, but generally speaking, it's around 11%, and it's kind of flat. But that's usually met with also higher savings rates. We're less right now in terms of saving at the U.S. level than we were pre-pandemic, but we're back to the same debt levels as we were pre-pandemic.
No, that's not a good number.
It's not great. It's a diverting trend there, right? And so what's happening is not only are more, do we have more in debt right now, but it's also at a higher monthly cost because of the increase in interest rates, right? So even if you had the same credit card debt as you did, a couple of years ago, the relative amount that you're spending on it on minimum payments is massively more. We're starting to see delinquencies, 90-day delinquencies on credit cards spiking quite a bit. What's nice is home equity lines of credit and mortgages. We're not seeing any issues as of yet, really, at least widespread. There might be some issues here or there, but generally speaking, you're beginning to see increases in delinquencies for credit cards, which is not good. You started to all of a sudden see a massive spike in delinquencies for student loans also. Student
loans is we could spend an hour talking about that.
Yeah.
I have another question. Somebody, actually a mutual friend of ours, but I don't know if he wants his name on here. So he wanted to, definitely with this question. What regulation are you currently seeing in Clark County or Nevada that's hindering, the success of Las Vegas the most? So what is there any regulation that you think is just really hindering our growth? I mean, I can give you an example. We have some really good county commissioners, and I'm dealing with a project right now where we're trying to do some cosmetic improvements to this building.
Yeah.
And they want us to do some other improvements.
Yeah.
They make absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah.
And when the conversations take place, but again, they have their role, and I'm not knocking them at all. It's just you can disagree, but it is what it is. So you just figure it out.
Yeah.
Change the plans, compromise on something, and move on.
Right.
But obviously, when you're in the real estate world, you want to do the most for the least cost. But there's some things that they want us to do where I'm like, that actually, it's a safety issue that makes sense.
Sure, of course.
Is there anything you'd like to see that maybe would help streamline or attract businesses or people into Nevada?
Yeah, so I think there's a decent amount there, to be honest with you. Whittling it down to just one thing is kind of difficult, but I'd say that more than likely the one thing that could do the best, one type of regulation change that we could see that would do the most benefit, especially to commercial and residential real estate, is overhauling or kind of like really, really reviewing, if not repealing, because I like repeal a lot more than I like reform.
I love it.
Reform gives bureaucrats more things to do. Repeal is something that's actually much more important. A lot of looking at our zoning laws, in all honesty. Zoning and land use is something that's...
We could start over from scratch.
Yeah, there's a long history of this, and just the way that the city grew in conjunction with the fact that it was sold piece by piece by the BLM over time. It's really shaped how the city kind of developed, right? We've got some really cool, Dr. Sean McCoy at UNLV's Lead Institute for Real Estate has these really cool visualizations that show the erosion of developable land in Las Vegas over time. So it's vacant land, and you can see how it develops, and you can see like these weird things where all of a sudden there's this weird vein that grows in like the south, and you're like, why is that there? Because somebody bought a bunch of land, and then there's nothing in between. Like when you're driving in Vegas, and all of a sudden you're driving down Buffalo, and you end up in the side of Spanish Trails. Does that make any sense? Well, it does, because that grew 20 years before that street existed. Right. And so that's a patchwork of the federal government piecemealing things out, and then also what's allowed to be developed as a result of these zoning and land use laws.
Sure.
We're a very new city in comparison to a lot of major cities throughout the U.S. You look at New York, you look at L.A., you look at all these major metros, they're a lot older than we are. We're not that old compared to these other really big cities. And that's
you go to Chicago or L.A. Like I had breakfast in a place in L.A., the building was like 80 years old.
Right. And so the thing is with that, we're a city that grew with the idea of zoning laws as part of it. Zoning is pretty new. It's like it's within the last century that it's really taken hold, which is also within when Vegas was born. And so what happened is we've become too planned and too piecemeal over time, rather than the market kind of coming in and saying we're able to grow this in this way and develop it so it's a kind of a cohesive narrative, right? So and also we tend to be one of the more highly zoned cities in the entire U.S. If you look, there's some interesting data. There's a study from Cato that looks at barriers to entrepreneurship, and Nevada doesn't rank very well in that study. We rank like actually 43rd. We rank 43rd on barriers to entrepreneurship. One of the highest things is zoning laws. Another thing is, in general, we happen to have very complex legal code. Yeah, this is
repeal and replace.
Yeah, it's what it is. It's roll things back. I mean, if we were to look at just at the state level, there's two different structures of regulations that exist. There's the Nevada Revised Statutes, which is what all our legislators vote on, and then there's the Nevada Administrative Code, which is what all the bureaucracies create. If you were to read the entire Nevada Administrative Code, it would take you 7 weeks straight of reading.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
No, neither am I. And there's things that have been on the books since the 60s, if not older. And so a lot of this is what we could do is we can go through piece by piece by piece, like the question asked, and what's the one thing? What's the one thing? For me, it's what's the one big thing that we can do that would remove the most of this? And there's things like sunset laws, what Idaho did in 2019, where they let their entire administrative code expire unless people said, no, we need this.
That's a great idea. If you don't use it, you lose it.
I think the biggest thing that we can do is pass these laws that allow for the market to come through. There's sunset laws that would allow for expiration dates for backward-looking things, and there's also another policy thing that I've advocated for is called regulatory sandboxes. It's a horrible name for a really good idea. Basically, the whole idea is let's roll the clock back to Lyft and Uber trying to break into the market in 2015?
No, that was a process.
Yeah, well, I was actually the first illegal Uber rider in Northern Nevada. I decided they turned it on before getting approved. I wanted to do it, jumped in a car, took a ride around the block. I didn't need to. I just wanted to do it to stick it to the government, basically, is why I did the ride. But then when I worked at Uber, I actually went through the data. I was like, I wonder how early I was. And I'm the first rider in Reno, which is really funny.
That is funny.
But when they tried to get online, they had to break the law first. There was 2 years worth of lobbying. It took a lot of time. For 2 years, we could have existed, but we didn't as a rideshare in the state. Over that 2 year time frame, 400 people or so died to DUIs. One of those people could have been saved, potentially, by having rideshare here. And I know that because as a result of a lot of our work that we did, we got recognized by Zero Fatalities while I was at Lyft as being a reason for having the first New Year's Eve without any deaths on the road.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's lives. And sometimes what's permissible gets in the way of what's possible. And what a sandbox would do is it'd say, hey, entrepreneur, you've got this idea, it goes against the regulations. Why don't we suspend it for a year so you can show us what you can do? Why don't we allow you to test this idea rather than go through the time, money, effort, and energy of changing all the laws, hopefully within 120 days that happen every 2 years, Instead, we can allow the market to come through and say, I've got this really cool idea. Utah does it. They've got a universal sandbox where any industry is able to do it. Arizona does it. There's other states that do it too. These are things that we could do. There's some process implementation that goes along with it. The government's going to have to kind of step up and be like, all right, let's start reviewing our stuff. But private companies do it all the time. Like corporate restructuring happens where they go, entire teams go, you have no role anymore, right? Except with the government, it just continues to exist long term. And that's where, it really starts to hamper things. Entrepreneurs who want to be here start to have to deal with a patchwork of regulations.
And if there's other places they can go, they're going to go there.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with the market's ability to do things that it wants to do.
That's a very valid point. I will say one thing, though. I know it's easy to focus on things that are like negative, but Nevada does do a lot of really good things here. I mean, I love living here just geographically based on skiing. And I mean, we've got Mount Charleston. I tell people we have a ski mountain here that's 30 minutes from my house, and they're just like, wait, what?
I have a tagline that I've come up with for the last 15 years ago. I think R&R partners or the LVCVA should use it. So this is my first time going public by saying this. Rather than what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas or whatever else, the tagline is, it's Vegas. The one thing we have is everything.
Yeah,
and it's the truth. What I love that Vegas does is when we push boundaries, doing things that nobody else can do. The most exciting things that are happening in the city for me are the Sphere, or is the entertainment district at Area 15, is something like Stadium Swim at Circa. It's stuff that can't exist other places that we go, no, this can be here, and creates an experience that you can't get anywhere else. It's cool that we have all the sports and all the everything else that's really awesome. That works elsewhere, and it's great, and it can work here too. But the thing that puts us above everywhere else is when we do things that stretch the limits of the imagination, and that's where Vegas leads.
What do you think of Brightline? Maybe not what's going to think of it. Do you think it's going to get done?
I don't. I think there's a lot of activity there. I think that the big thing and general rule of thumb for me is there's activity and then there's sustainable growth. If you require subsidies in order to get moving, it's probably not sustainable. And so for me, Brightline could be really beneficial if the market can find a way to fund it and fully fund it and put it together. But they're also going to have to find a way for the prices for the train rides to not be astronomical. Because at first I heard like $300 round trip, and I was like, that seems like way too much of a high price point with way too much friction, where I have to drive my car, park my car, get in there, or take an Uber or Lyft to get there, and then once you get here, do the same thing. Whereas
$500 round trip.
Yeah, where I can just hop on a flight for $60 down to Southern California. You know what I mean? And so like it's I think that there's a really good possibility that it could do great to join the two regions together and increase that, but it has to come in a sustainable fashion. Otherwise, it's just going to be a flash like California's high-speed rail system that's been a lot of billions spent on planning and nothing spent on being built.
What was that one? The California spent like $7 billion on like a mile of track, just something insane.
And Brightline just came through and asked, because of rising increases in costs and everything else, for an extra $6 billion.
Oh, just an extra $6 billion.
Just an extra.
No problem.
No.
I mean, billions. Well, Cameron, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I know we covered quite a bit. Thank you for taking the time. Yeah. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, because I know you speak at a lot of events, you're a wealth of knowledge with the Nevada economy and policies. I know there's a lot of companies, and I know you deal with a lot of companies and trade organizations. What is the best way to get a hold of you if someone wants to reach out to you?
Absolutely. There's a couple different ways. First of all, LinkedIn is probably best. Cameron Belt on LinkedIn. I think it's Belt Cameron on the URL, but Cameron Belt on LinkedIn. You'll see my face there. cbelt at rcgecon.com is my work email. RCG Economics is who I do represent and who I've been doing a lot of the work with and doing fabulous work here regionally for the last 30 years. Also, I do write my own stuff at a website called Economics 4. That's Economics 4 spelled FOR. And right now I'm actually slow releasing my first book. It's called Economics for Busy People, which is basically 52 chapters that are all 5 minutes or less, explaining very basic ideas in economics, all the way to some advanced ones that I think people of all walks of life should know, but written without economic jargon. Written in normal language. Is actually about a 7th grade level if you trust the AI that I threw it through to see like where the grade level was at. But in any case, that's the best way to reach out to me.
So that's awesome. You're right. You've written a book, so we have to add that. You're a fellow with a bunch of impressive organizations. You're with a good company, and now you're an author. I'm excited. You're going to have to send me that. I'm going to
absolutely
have to read that. So thank you again for taking the time, and have a great weekend.
Hey, thank you. You too.